Pan Am Flight 103, 1988. On December 21, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103, a regular scheduled route, was en route from Frankfurt to Detroit with planned stops in London and New York. The aircraft, a Boeing 747 named Clipper Maid of the Seas, had been in service with Pan Am since 1970. After taking off from London's Heathrow Airport, the plane was cruising over southern Scotland on its way to New York. Everything seemed normal until about 38 minutes into the flight. Suddenly, the plane exploded in the sky above a small town called Lockerbie in Scotland. It broke apart midair, killing all 259 people on board. Tragically, 11 more people on the ground were also killed by falling debris. The crash caused a lot of destruction in the town, with pieces of the plane scattered across a wide area. What followed was one of the biggest international investigations of its time. Forensics teams of Scotland, the FBI, and others sifted through tens of thousands of debris fragments. They eventually traced the explosion to a bomb hidden inside a Toshiba radio, packed in a brown Samsonite suitcase with clothes linked to a shop in Malta. The suitcase had been loaded onto the plane in Frankfurt but wasn't tied to any passenger, which was a major security red flag. The bomb was made with Semtex and triggered by a Swiss-made MST-13 timer, the kind sold only in Libya. After years of digging, 2 Libyan intelligence officers were charged in 1991. One of them, Abdelbasid al-Maghrawi, was convicted in 2001 and sentenced to life. He was controversially released in 2009 due to terminal illness. Pan Am Flight 73, 1986. Pan Am Flight 73 was carrying out a typical international route from Mumbai to New York City with planned layovers in Karachi and Frankfurt on September 5, 1986. The aircraft was a Boeing 747-121 N656PA named Clipper Empress of the Seas. It was a big plane, with 360 passengers and 19 crew members on board, heading through some of the busiest travel hubs in the world. But things took a horrible turn during the stopover in Karachi. While the plane was still on the ground, 4 men dressed like airport security officers got on board. Turns out, they were actually armed hijackers from a Palestinian group called the Abu Nidal Organization. Once inside, they took control of the plane. Their main demand was to get a pilot who could fly them to Cyprus, where they planned to negotiate the release of Palestinian prisoners. To pressure the airline, they tragically picked up an American passenger named Rajesh Kumar and killed him. The situation lasted for hours, 16 long, tense hours. And then, out of nowhere, the hijackers opened fire inside the plane and set off explosives. It was absolute chaos. 22 passengers lost their lives and over 100 others were badly injured. But even in that terrifying moment, some heroes stepped up, especially one woman named Nirja Banat, the senior flight purser. As soon as the hijacking started, she managed to alert the pilots, who escaped through a hatch, which meant the plane couldn't take off. She also hid American passports so the hijackers couldn't target more US passengers. Nirja did everything she could to protect the people on board. Tragically, she was killed while helping passengers get out safely. Later, she was honored with India's highest award for bravery, the Ashoka Chakra. Eventually, all 4 hijackers were caught by Pakistani authorities. They were sentenced to death at first, but later their sentences were changed to life in prison. In 2001, one of them, Zaid Hassan Abd al-Latif Safrini, was released, but the FBI picked him up right away and he was sent to the US, where he's now serving a 160-year sentence. The others were let go in 2008, and efforts to find them are still going on. Pan Am Flight 806, 1974. Pan American World Airways Flight 806, a Boeing 707-321B, was flying across the Pacific from Auckland to Los Angeles via Pago Pago and Honolulu on January 30th, 1974. As the plane was getting ready to land in Pago Pago, the weather took a turn for the worse. It was raining heavily, winds were strong, and visibility was really low. The pilots were using the airport's instrument landing system, what's known as ILS, to guide the plane to runway 5. But during the approach, the plane went lower than it was supposed to, around 3,800 feet before reaching the runway. The left wing clipped some trees and the plane crashed into a jungle area. The impact was violent. It broke the aircraft apart and caused a fire. Out of the 101 people on board, 87 passengers and 10 crew members lost their lives. It remains the deadliest aviation accident in American Samoa's history. After the crash, the National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation. When they released their final report in 1977, they said the main cause was that the crew didn't recognize a sudden change in wind, something called a microburst, soon enough. At the time, Wind shear like that wasn't well understood and was extremely hard to detect. On top of that, the bad weather and the lack of proper altitude and speed callouts from the crew made the situation even worse. Pan Am Flight 1736, 1977. Pan Am Flight 1736 was a charter Boeing 747 named Clipper Victor. On March 27, 1977, it took off from Los Angeles, made a stop in New York, and was heading to Gran Canaria Airport in the Canary Islands. Most of the people on board were American tourists excited to start a Mediterranean cruise. But things didn't go as planned. A terrorist bombing at Gran Canaria Airport caused several flights, including Pan Am 1736 and KLM Flight 4805, to be diverted to a smaller airport nearby, Los Rodeos Airport in Tenerife. Because so many planes were suddenly sent there, the airport became overcrowded. There wasn't enough space, so planes had to taxi on the runway instead of the regular taxiways. On top of that, thick fog rolled in, making it really hard for pilots and air traffic controllers to see. While Pan Am 1736 was taxiing on the runway, KLM Flight 4805, also a Boeing 747, was getting ready for takeoff just ahead. That's when a terrible miscommunication happened. The KLM captain thought he had permission to take off, even though the Pan Am plane was still on the same runway. He started the takeoff, and even though the Pan Am pilots tried to get out of the way, there wasn't enough time. The two planes collided. The crash caused a huge explosion of fire, completely destroying both aircraft. Everyone on the KLM flight, 248 people, died along with 335 of the 396 people on the Pan Am flight. It became the deadliest accident in aviation history. Later investigations found that the main cause was the KLM captain taking off without full clearance. Confusing radio messages, the lack of ground radar at the airport, and thick fog all added to the tragedy. Pan Am Flight 759, 1982. Flight 759, a domestic Boeing 727 flight named Clipper Defiance, was on its normal route from Miami, Florida to San Diego, California, July 9, 1982. The flight was supposed to stop in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Las Vegas, Nevada along the way. The passengers were traveling for different reasons, including business and vacation. The Boeing 727 was a popular narrow-body jet known for its ability to operate from shorter runways, making it well-suited for domestic routes. On board were 145 people, including 7 crew members. Shortly after taking off from New Orleans International Airport, the plane ran into a serious weather issue. It encountered something called a microburst, a powerful, sudden downdraft of air that's associated with thunderstorms. This made the plane lose altitude very quickly. Despite the crew's best efforts to control the situation, the plane crashed into a neighborhood in Kenner, Louisiana, just over 4,600 feet from the runway. Tragically, all 145 people on board were killed along with 8 people on the ground. It became one of the deadliest crashes in U.S. history. The National Transportation Safety Board investigated the accident. Their final report said the main cause of the crash was the plane flying into the microburst during takeoff. This sudden change in wind caused a dangerous downdraft and made the plane lose altitude fast. At the time, it was really hard for pilots to detect these wind changes in time, especially since the technology to detect wind shear was limited. Plus, the crew didn't have the most up-to-date weather info to help them respond better. Pan Am Flight 812. On April 22, 1974, Flight 812 was flying from Hong Kong to Los Angeles in a Boeing 707 named Clipper Climax. The Boeing 707 was one of the early jetliners that revolutionized long-haul air travel with its speed and range, and Pan Am had been one of its earliest and largest operators. The flight had scheduled stops in Bali, Sydney, Fiji, and Honolulu, making it a key trans-Pacific route. On board were 96 passengers and 11 crew members, many of whom were headed to Bali for vacation. After about 4 hours and 20 minutes of flying, the plane was approaching Ngurah Rai International Airport in Denpasar, Bali. The crew said they were descending through 2,500 feet and were told by the airport to keep descending and report when they could see the runway. The crew confirmed the instructions, but soon after, communication with them was lost. Tragically, the plane crashed into Masihi Mountain, a dormant volcano, about 42.5 nautical miles northwest of the airport. Everyone on board, 107 people, was killed. The investigation later found that the plane's automatic direction finder, which helps pilots navigate, wasn't working properly. Because the ADF was giving incorrect information, the crew thought they were closer to the airport than they really were. This mistake led them to make an early right turn, sending the plane directly into the mountains, which caused the crash. Pan Am Flight 160, 1973. Pan American World Airways Flight 160, a cargo route flown on November 3, 1973, used a Boeing 707 named Clipper Titan and departed from New York's John F. Kennedy Airport bound for Frankfurt with stops in Glasgow, Scotland. The plane was carrying a massive load, about 53,000 pounds of freight, including 15,400 pounds of chemicals for industrial use. About 30 minutes into the flight, the crew started noticing smoke in the cockpit, so they decided to divert to Boston's Logan Airport. But as the smoke got worse, they started preparing for an emergency landing. Sadly, just as they were approaching the runway, the plane became uncontrollable and crashed, killing all 3 crew members. After the crash, investigators found that the smoke came from a dangerous reaction between leaking nitric acid and sawdust used as packing material. The acid had been poorly packed, and it caused the smoke to fill the cockpit, making it almost impossible for the crew to see or control the plane. On top of that, the yaw damper, which helps control the aircraft, was accidentally switched off during the emergency, making the situation even worse. The National Transportation Safety Board said the main reason for the crash was the smoke in the cockpit, which made the situation uncontrollable. Other issues included the improper packing of chemicals, not following the right safety procedures, and the crew not being fully prepared to deal with this kind of emergency. Pan Am Flight 816, 1973. Pan Am Flight 816 was a flight from Auckland, New Zealand to San Francisco on July 22, 1973, with a stop in Tahiti. The plane, a Boeing 707 called Clipper Winged Racer, was carrying 69 passengers and 10 crew members, mostly tourists on their way to the U.S. After landing in Tahiti for refueling, the plane took off from Fa'a International Airport at night, but soon after liftoff, something went wrong. Instead of climbing, the plane started going up slowly, then suddenly veered left and plunged into a steep descent. Just moments later, it crashed into the Pacific Ocean, only a couple miles off the coast of Papeete. Tragically, only 1 passenger survived, and most of the wreckage sank into the deep water, making it really hard to recover anything. The investigation faced a huge setback because both the flight data and cockpit voice recorders were never found. Without those, it was tough to figure out exactly what happened. Still, they managed to explore several likely causes. One strong possibility was a failure of the altitude indicator, a critical instrument that helps pilots understand the plane's position. If it malfunctioned, the crew may have become disoriented, especially during a night takeoff over the ocean, where there were no visual cues. The experts also noted that a crack in the cockpit window had been reported before departure. Although deemed safe for flight, the added fuel for a lower cruising altitude may have increased takeoff weight. Crew fatigue and pre-existing health issues, including high blood pressure, were also flagged as potential factors. While no single cause could be confirmed, the crash was likely the result of technical, environmental, and human factors. Pan Am Flight 799, 1968. Pan Am Flight 799 was a cargo flight that took off from Los Angeles on December 26, 1968. The plane, a Boeing 707 named Clipper Racer, was headed to Cam Ranh, South Vietnam, with stops in Anchorage, Alaska, Tokyo, Japan, and Da Nang, South Vietnam. It was carrying mail and supplies to support the Vietnam War. When the plane arrived in Anchorage, the weather was so bad it had to divert to Almendorf Air Force Base. After a few delays with fuel and equipment issues, the crew got ready to take off. While taxiing, the captain retracted the wing flaps to prevent ice from building up, planning to extend them again before taking off. But with everything going on and the pressure to leave quickly, the crew forgot to pull the flaps back. So when the plane took off, it didn't have enough lift. Just after liftoff, the right wingtip hit the ground and the plane crashed. Unfortunately, all 3 crew members on board lost their lives. The National Transportation Safety Board looked into the crash and found a few main reasons it happened. First, the pre-takeoff checklist didn't include a flap check, so the crew missed it. The warning system also didn't work, so they didn't get an alert about the flaps being wrong. And with the pressure of meeting an air traffic control deadline, the crew ended up skipping some important steps. After the investigation, the NTSB recommended changes to cockpit checklists and improvements to the warning systems for cold weather.